The stone was not smooth, and that was what Bran liked best about it. His right hand found the nubs where frost had once expanded the cracks and winter had fattened the joints. His bare toes, he preferred the feel of stone to boot leather when he climbed, curled over a weathered edge that jutted like a molar from the flank of the first keep. He had learned to trust his toes as much as his fingers. There were places where the wall seemed to breathe with the foyers of hot springs deep below, a faint warmth in the granite. There were spots where lichens slicked the seams, and his toes were truer than fingertips for knowing the difference. He moved the way he always did when no one else was watching him move. Slowly, with no wasted motion, with a quiet he took pride in. He tested every reach before he committed to it. He kept his belly close to the keep, and when his knee bumped a shuttered opening he flattened and went still, letting his heart steady before the next stretch. He had think of nothing else when he climbed. That was part of why he loved it. Somewhere above, at an angle that would put him near the parapet if he went there, a rook watched with a coin-bright eye. Bran liked the ravens better, smarter, he thought, but the rooks were bolder. The rook jabbed and clicked its beak and sidled, then hopped away altogether when a steam-fattened puff lifted at the base of a merlin and turned into mist in the air. He wanted the old keep. He wanted the broken tower that teased him each time he crossed the yard with how easy its crumbling face looked. How quick a boy could go up if he were brave. Jon had said no to the broken tower, but Jon said no to a lot of things and then did them himself, just to show he could manage it better than anyone else. But when Bran's left hand reached for the next purchase, the stone shifted under his palm with a queer sandy give that he felt all the way into his shoulder. It was like pressing into damp bread. The rook skittered sideways and gave that arrogant call again, and Bran found he did not like the way the breeze curled along the wall. It felt less like breath and more like a word held in the mouth of an unkind uncle. "Not today," he whispered to the wall. He wasn't a fool. He didn't tell himself the tower was safe because he wanted it to be. He held where he was, and then he went down, which was not defeat. Down was a different kind of skill. It meant knowing when pride could turn to pain. His toes sought the edges he had just used, and he did the memory of his body the courtesy of trusting it. At the bottom, the stable yard smelled of straw and horse and the faint green of cut hay. Summer's head lifted from where he had been nosing an old blanket. The direwolf's eyes were not the yellow of common wolves. They were amber, and in some lights they were leaf brown with bits of gold. His ears pricked, and he made the low chuff that was not quite a bark. "You aren't to follow me," Bran told him, but he scratched the thick fur at the wolf's neck as he said it. Summer accepted any contradiction that came with affection. Robb said the wolves spoiled the boys as if they were pups themselves. Jon said the wolves were reminders that they were not alone. Theon said the wolves stank. Theon said many things that seemed less clever when spoken aloud. Bran washed his hands at the cistern, the water cold enough to sting, and rubbed the damp from his fingers onto his tunic, then onto Summer's shoulders. The wolf shook himself, and Bran laughed, because laughter rose sometimes in him as quickly and as warm as the stones underfoot. The yard was busy with the small work of a great house. The ironsmith's hammer sang at the forge. Micken's strike had a particular rhythm to it that Bran could tell apart from any other smith's. In the glass gardens, a manservant in a patched coat leaned over seedlings with a tenderness Bran had seen him offer neither man nor beast elsewhere. A groom led a mare with feathered feet from stall to sunlight and back. When Bran crossed to the practice butts, he passed 2 washerwomen hauling linens. The steam that rose from the troughs curled around their arms like snakes. Winterfell was always steaming. The earth breathed out the heat of its hidden springs, and the breath of the place ghosted the mended panes of glass and dissipated along the walls and walked the mornings like a shy giant. Jon was at the butts already, hair loose, bow unstrung. He sat like someone who had been waiting without wanting to show it. Ghost lay with his muzzle on Jon's boot, and the white wolf's eyes were closed but not resting. Ghost's senses never rested, though his body often did. The snow-white coat took the light and gave none back. "You didn't go up the broken tower," Jon said, not looking at Bran. He had no way of knowing, except he always knew the things Bran thought he had the best secrets about. "I went up the first keep." Bran took the bow Jon offered. It was lighter than Rob's but heavier than the practice bow's old Nan would have him use if it were left to her. Maester Luwin said, "The body grows steadier under steady things." Bran thought the bow made him steadier. He squinted at the target, his left eye, then his right, and lost the world around the painted circle. The first shot dipped under the bottom. "Wind," Jon said before Bran could frown. "Don't fight it. Accept it like you accept the stones. Let the feather tell you which way the arrow longs to go." Bran let the next arrow ride the draw differently and felt it fly truer before it struck. It hit the target with a thwack he liked, not in the center, but in the painted ring. Jon grunted, which was high praise when it came from Jon. "You'll have to accept more than wind if father takes us south," Bran said as he set his feet. He spoke it because it had been in him for days. He couldn't hold thoughts in like Robb. They seeped out of him in talk or came out all at once like a burst. Jon looked down the field as if the King's Road itself might unfurl there. Ghost's ear twitched. "Come," Bran said, and did not wait to see if Jon would. They reached the outer yard in time to see the first of the bright helms ride in under the portcullis. Men at the gate parted like wheat before a plow. The king's banner marked the tail of the column like a splash of sun paint. The creak of saddle leather and the jingle of harness sounded to Bran like 100 small songs, all trying to be the same song and failing. Robb, already there with a wash of men around him like a current around a rock, turned and saw Bran and grinned. His smile ate his whole face. Grey Wind's muzzle was beaded with spittle. The wolf's chest swelled with a soundless sound that was partly pant and partly readiness. Theon stood at Robb's shoulder, hands on his hips, the picture of someone who believes he is the most important piece of any picture. He had combed his hair and oiled his boots. He looked at the approaching riders as if they were a game brought in for his amusement. Bran had seen the king once in a book. A crude ink-stained face with a beard that might have been made of bracken and a crown that floated above it crookedly. The man who rode through the gate had a beard like black moss thickening a boulder and had to push a smile through it, as a man might part branches to make his way through woods. He seemed too big for his horses, which seemed both ridiculous and true. When he dismounted, the ground felt the meeting and told Bran's bones about it. Eddard Stark came forward, his face the face that the North wore when it met trouble. Not cold, but not like summer, either. He bent his knee in greeting, though the movement was brief, almost like the nod of one man to another man used to being obeyed but not loving the part of himself that demanded it. Bran watched their embrace, the king's big arms swallowing his father, the laughter that broke free in both of them as if it had been held in too long. It looked like two men letting their shoulders put down packs they had carried for years. Lady Catelyn came forward with Sansa in a gown the color of sweet berry preserves and Arya with her hair doing precisely what Sansa's did not. Myrcella's smile was a careful blossom when she was presented, and hers was the sweet scent of a child taught early to think of her scent. Tommen flushed and bowed as if he had been practicing bowing his whole life and was still surprised by his knees. Joffrey, whose hair was too fair to be wheat and too pale to be gold, looked over Winterfell's walls as if he were inspecting a stallion he had been promised but doubted. He smiled at Sansa, and the smile did not reach his eyes. Sansa smiled back and colored and did not look at him again immediately, which was the sort of thing that made Sansa's needlework neat and Arya's finger prick scarred. The queen's smile was not the small polite bloom of her daughters. It was a blade-shone edge-on. She had the loveliest armor Bran had ever seen, all velvet and fur and the smoothness of someone used to being looked at and met by looks as clear as mirrors. The man behind her in golden armor had a face that people would remember even if they did not want to. He wore his looks like some men wear rings, easily and all the time, and regarded Winterfell the way men who had never been cold regarded snow. Beautiful, perhaps, and a little unreal. Bran thought, almost without thinking it. I could climb to the roof of the great keep and drop an apple and hit that golden head, if I wished. The thought was not cruel so much as it was a measuring of distances in his mind, which was what climbing had taught him to do. "We feast tonight," Robert said, his voice as generous as the rest of him, and the yard lifted with it, for a king's voice can be a coin or a cudgel. Servants ran, and guardsmen looked as if they had not eaten in weeks even if they had. There was music and heat and meat. Bran remembered the squeeze of space more than the particular meats, the way a hall full of bodies and hot courses at ND torches made one part of his skin sweat and the other prickly cold. Smoke rose in banners toward the rafters where the hound's eyes caught torchlight and shone. The king drank, and the men who wanted to be near power drank and laughed. Father drank too, but he sipped and smiled and moved through talk like a man moving through brambles, careful not to be caught by any thorn he could see. Mother presided the way she did everything, with hands that never stilled and thoughts that made plan after plan like a weaver laying colors. Maester Luwin watched all, his fingers worrying a ring as if thinking through the shape of the feast itself. Bran sat between Robb and Arya, which could have been peace or war depending on how many times Arya flicked a pea at Theon before Robb caught her wrist. Sansa sat further down with Myrcella, and their laughter sounded like the tight little bells on a dancer's ankle. Bran tried to hear what they were saying, but there was too much noise. He ate with appetite and kept glancing at the golden man in the beautiful armor and the queen who never seemed to touch food while everyone around her pretended not to notice that. Joffrey leaned with his chair tilted on two legs until a guard put a boot on the back of it, and he colored, and that was the one time Bran liked him because he looked like a boy then and not like a little lord who had never broken a bone. When the cups had been going around for longer than most reason could follow, the king rose unsteadily and slapped Father on the shoulder so hard it sounded like a paddle on pond water. "Come," he said, and for a moment the voice turned private. "Down to the gods you keep under your house. I've something to put to you where the dead can listen." Robert did not look to his queen. He did not look to anyone. It grew smaller and older all at once, and then steadier after he had been within long enough. Father went with the king, and Robb looked as if he wanted to follow, and Mother put a hand lightly on Robb's arm and he stayed. Bran tried to imagine gods under a house listening like old hounds in their sleep, opening one eye each when their masters moved. His mind liked images like that, and Jon said that was because Bran could make a picture of anything and put himself in it. After the feast, Bran found Jon near the back of the hall where the heat lessened into drafts. Jon had slipped into a shadowed place and watched people the way a cat might, quiet and without judgment but with a knowing that seemed old. "You'll go to the crypts tonight?" Bran asked. He did not know if it was something one did when kings came and asked it. Jon shook his head. "That's not for me." He held a cup he had not been seen to drink. Ghost lay at his feet like a spill of snow. Arya chased Nymeria up the aisle and then had to kneel to pat a frightened serving girl's arm and whisper an apology that made Bran want to be gentler even when he did not think he had been rough. "Father will do what the king asks of him," Jon said once Arya had gone out of earshot. Because they were boys together and because the world was different when they were boys. And because when Father believes a thing is duty, it grows larger than food and sleep for him. Bran thought of what duty was to him. It was the practicing of archery even when his fingers ached and his eyes watered with the sting of the wind. It was sitting through Maester Luwin's dry tales of kings and treaties and wars until details turned into stories. Duty was the thing that turned a small boy into a Stark. He did not know what duty looked like when it had a capital city tied to it. Later, after the king and Father returned and the hall cooled with the bodies leaving it, Bran heard Father and Mother talking in their solar, their voices under the whisper of the spring-fed channels. "I swore I would never go south again," Father said. "The city smells of rot to me. It eats and never has done." "Then do not go," Mother said, and Bran could hear the hand she put on Father's sleeve even though he could not see it. "Let the south rest with its own guardian. You are the North's. They need you here. Your people know your hand on the tiller. If it were only the city, Cat. If it were only feasts and flatterers. But it is Robert. It is the boy I knew under the man I see. He has lost Jon Arryn." Father breathed the name as if it were something warmer than air. "He wants me at his side. He asked it in the place where the bones listen. He made it a promise. The last promise in that place cost you your sister," Mother said quietly, and the water murmured as if to agree. "Must the dead ask the most of us?" Bran crept away then, not because he was told to leave but because he always left when voices turned like that, remembering the way Jon left rooms sometimes to give people the space to be truer with one another. He took Summer out into the yard. The night was a bowl turned over the world. The stars were the pinholes the gods peered through. Summer pressed his large head into Bran's hand. There was a rumor in the skin under Bran's palm, some silent music that joined him to the wolf in a loop like a lazy river. Bran stood very still and felt that, and for a moment he felt something else, not thoughts but something like sensing in more directions than he had eyes to look. They came with a letter the next day, the one that made Mother's face go thoughtful serious in a way that was different from worry and different from anger. It was the letter of a sister to a sister, and the seal was a bird T. Hat liked heights and circles. Bran knew enough of Maester's work to know that sometimes letters were like cups into which people poured only some of the wine they had on hand. Maester Luwin said a wise reader tasted what wasn't there too. Mother tasted the lack and then took the letter to Father and closed the door. When they opened it again later, their decision clung to them like damp. "Your father will go south with the king," Mother told them in the hall that smelled of yesterday's meat turned into today's stew. Sansa clapped a hand to her mouth and made a small sound. Arya made a larger sound and then tried to swallow it. Robb nodded, which was how Robb took every piece of news he did not like, as another thing to square his shoulders against. "I should hold Winterfell," Robb said, without fishing for it, and Father's eyes warmed with something not entirely pride and not entirely warning. "You will with your mother," Father said. "Winterfell is too big a horse for any one rider the first time one takes a saddle." Bran listened hard without seeming to. He waited for it. "And Bran," he said. He could not help it. "Will I go?" Father looked at Mother, and the glance passed so much back and forth that Bran felt foolish for all the guessing he had done about adult secrets. They were not secrets. They were burdens each held like an end of a log that the other knew the weight of. "You may," Father said. "I meant you to stay, but there is a piece of your hunger that will do you good there, if you swallow the rest of it at my bidding. You will see the city, and you will sit your pony at my side, and you will look upon the men who play their games as if they were kings in a yard of marble instead of dirt. It will not make you a man. It will make you know more of them than of yourself. That will be enough for now." Bran couldn't keep himself from grinning. He thought of towers he had not yet seen. He thought of roofs sloped differently, and the lines that made other walls climbable even if one could not imagine them now. He thought of the way markets must smell when you had olives and oranges, two things he had eaten only when the right ship came to White Harbor and someone with coin brought them here. Arya scowled as if it were a personal slight wrapped in a general one. Sansa stood so still that Bran feared she might fall if her face made another expression. "I shall be good," Sansa said, but in a way that suggested goodness was a heavy dress and she would wear it beautifully even if it chafed. "Will the Queen look upon me as a potential bride?" she asked later, when Mother sat with her and smoothed her hair, and Arya lurked at the door like someone ready to start a fight and then run from it. Mother smiled in a way that made Bran love her a little more. "The Queen will look upon you as a girl who can be used to buying 2 houses, if she thinks it will help her sons and her husband. That is what queens do. You will look upon her as an example and a warning. That is what a clever daughter does." That night, while the house slept, Jon brought Arya out to the yard with a wrapped parcel under his arm. Bran followed because following Jon had always been one of the quiet pleasures of his life. He liked the way Jon did things better than the way Theon did them. Jon did them as if the doing mattered more than the being seen to be doing them. He and Arya went to the armory, and Mikken opened the door for them with a little grumble that couldn't hide the fondness. Jon set the parcel on the bench and peeled back the cloth. The blade that lay within was hardly bigger than a man's hand, but it was not a toy. It was slender and sharp, and its quillins were simple. Bran leaned in despite himself, and Arya's breath caught in her throat in the way it sometimes did when she saw a horse she loved. "For her," Mikken said to Jon, but his eyes had gone to Arya's hands. "Keep the point between you and anything that thinks to hurt you," he told her, "and sit it in the weak parts and not the iron if you can help it." Arya looked up at Jon, throat tight, and did not cry because Arya did not like the way crying felt in her. "Don't tell Sansa," she said, and Jon laughed. The soft good laugh that Bran thought might be the best thing Jon owned. Ghost drifted along the yard with Summer at his shoulder. They threaded their path between benches and barrels as if the two of them shared a single body. When the dire wolves lifted their muzzles, the air told them things. Jon reached down to Ghost without looking. Arya slid the blade into the sheath Jon had sewn for it, the leather plain and clever. "What will you call it?" Bran asked. "Names are for singers," Arya said, but then later, when Bran had walked back out under the stars and then turned to look, he heard her say it very low, almost unwillingly, like someone giving in to the notion that a thing you love must be named if it is to know you. Needle. The king and his party took 2 days to gather themselves and their things for the road, though Bran suspected they could have departed that first afternoon if a sudden war had asked it. Bran spent those 2 days trying to memorize Winterfell with his eyes and his hands. The thickness of the gray stones when morning made them pearl, the way steam drifted from the pools near the hot springs like breath from sleeping giants, the faint green of the glass gardens, where the air was warm and damp and the vines curled as if they had relaxed into their growing. He climbed his favorite pathways. Up the kitchen tower where he could smell the bread in ovens. Across from one lip to a shuttered window and through, careful as a cat, so he could surprise Hullen scratching a horse's blaze and see the stablemaster's lined face soften into something like pride when he realized he had not heard Bran enter. Down again, not quite to the ground, to run his hand along the huge wheel of a cart as if touching something that had rolled through a dozen harvests. He climbed to say farewell. He made himself feel foolish for the feeling and then told himself it was the right sort of foolishness. Father would say, or had said, that what we love will hurt us, and we must love it anyway. On the third morning the yard sang with goodbyes. It took them the way a story takes you once it has made you its own, and you find you love the way it bends even when you are not altogether certain where it bends to. The King's Road south of Winterfell was rutted even in its best places, old stone buried under the slow red soil that rose and fell like breath. The air smelled of wet earth and new leaf. Bran learned the rhythm of travel quickly. There was the waking, where you had to remember where you were and why your pillow moved. It was summer's flank, or it was a cloak someone had laid over you. There was the breaking of camp that was linen and leather and the clatter of cookware until there was no camp at all anymore, only road moving under your horse. There was the midday where you were given bread and beef and a dried fruit if the cook liked you or if you had done something someone else had noticed. There was the setting of camp when the light began to lean, the way it leaned against the trees as if asking to stay but knowing it could not. The king rode at the front sometimes and at the back sometimes and in the middle when he wanted to put a large arm around his queen for the sake of an audience. Joffrey rode like a boy who wanted men to see he was a man, and men saw and did not say what they thought. Tommen's pony was plump and sure, and Tommen loved it the way some boys love cupcakes. Myrcella asked Bran the sort of questions that made Sansa smile to herself. Were there truly bears that slept for a whole winter? Did the snow bite as dogs did? Could one ever teach a wolf to learn a trick more refined than catching a thrown bit of meat? Arya did not sing, but she threw her legs over Nymeria's back sometimes as if she meant to ride the wolf, and then quickly thought better of it. Father rode silent mostly. When he spoke, sometimes it was to Jory, sometimes to the king, sometimes to Bran. He told him the names of the holdfasts they passed and why this one had stones that were smoother than the next. He told him which trees grew best where the soil dipped, and how to read the shape of field and fence and hedge to guess at the sort of man who owned them. Bran listened with his ears and with his eyes. At night the wolves lay around the camp the way warm stones make a cairn. Summer liked the downwind side unless Ghost had taken it, and then Summer would find a place he could watch Ghost and the rest of them both. Bran slept with his hand in Summer's fur and felt dreams that were more weight than color. "You ride like a boy," Joffrey told Bran, as if it were a reproach and a fact both. "You want a horse that answers like a man. I'll lend you mine and you can feel how it is when a beast knows it carries someone who why. I'll be king." Bran looked at Joffrey and at the horse and then at Father, who had turned his head just a little. Bran had had instruction in this, the measure of insult against the measure of truth. Joffrey was not wrong that he rode like a boy. He was a boy. He was not wrong about his horse, which was too finely bridled. He was not right about the thing he thought he was saying. "I like to hear the water," Bran said, which was no answer. The water moved. Joffrey made a sound that might have been a laugh if someone had taught him to make laughter gently. Sansa approached then, which meant Myrcella did too, because the girls had discovered they could widen the world into a less lonely place if they took it together. "Joff," Sansa said, and her voice held the note that told men they should behave if they wished someone to smile at them later. "You said you would show me the old blade the armorer repaired. Is it really from your grandfather's time?" Joffrey forgot Bran as if he had never known him. Sansa had that power without even wanting it. Bran touched Summer's head. The wolf's eyes were on Joffrey. They had not been on the water. But when Bran's fingers brushed the fur, Summer blinked and turned his muzzle away, sniffing up wind, where a shadow moved in trees. That night, under a sky that looked ready to break with heat lightning, Arya lost track of a boy who had been following their train. He was an undergrown creature with shirt and skin the color of dirt. He had piped at the edges of things for 2 days, curious as a crow. Arya befriended him the way she befriended stones and creeks and wildflowers, by making them into something to be used. She had asked him everything and told him nothing. That night she took bread to where he crouched near an alder and taught him how to throw a small stick so it landed exactly where she meant it to land. She threw the stick to make a point, and the point made him flinch, and then he laughed because he had not known a person like Arya existed. Sansa would have said the boy smelled bad. Arya said he smelled like being free in a wood, and Bran did not know which of them was more right. It was Arya who leapt up when a man in a torn cloak stumbled out of the trees too close to the edge of the camp and cried something about wolves with eyes like red stones. Arya called to Jory before she called to her father, which told Bran who she thought could get there faster. Jory did, and the man's tale turned to breath and then to soup and then to nothing but another story told by a man who'd walked too long with not enough water. The days did their work and made different people of them simply by taking them and passing them along. Robb laughed with Theon and then glared at him and then laughed again, and Theon looked at everything that was not his as if it might be, if only the world had been arranged more cleverly. Sansa braided Myrcella's hair the way Mother had taught her, and Myrcella sang songs Sansa had never heard but pretended she had. Arya rode with the guardsmen until one told her to fall back, and then she fell back only 3 horses' length, and then surged forward again when the guardsman altered his line of sight. Father kept a weather eye out even on days when the weather was mild. He looked happiest when he caught Bran looking. He had always looked happier when he caught Bran doing anything he had been told not to do if the thing itself were not in fact dangerous. On the 10th day the world narrowed and sharpened and took an edge. It was a morning like any other, dew on grass and mist lying in folds in the low places as if the earth had been blanketed carelessly. Joffrey decided he wanted to practice sword work on the bank of the stream that ran alongside the road. He said it loudly enough that he must have hoped it would sound like a command and not a wish. His master-at-arms, a large man with a voice like a log splitting, stood with arms crossed. "Spar where we stop," he said. "Not in mud. You'll stain the steel and your boots at the same time." "I mean to spar," Joffrey said, turning the 2 syllables of spar into 3. "With living people, not posts." His eyes flicked to where Arya warmed her hands over a cup. "Perhaps the little wolf's sister wants practice. I would be gentle, I promise." Sansa reached him before Arya could. "It's a beautiful morning for a ride," she said. "You promised I could see the hawks, if there were hawks. You promised to show me what a peregrine is." Bran saw the way Joffrey's pupils widened, just a hair, a tell of someone realizing that his day might go easier if it went Sansa's way. Men wanted what Sansa asked of them. That was simply a truth. Could be a danger, too. They took their hawks and their horses and went for the ride. Bran watched them go with a dozen thoughts in his hand that he did not pick up to examine. That Joffrey smiled best when he had the advantage, that Sansa smiled best when what she had hoped for came to pass, that Arya's face when left out of something had an anger in it that hurt to look at. Father did not watch Sansa ride away. Father was over a map with Jory, his finger laying out the next day's march as if it were a line drawn in the dirt that would disappear if stepped on. Bran and Arya went the other direction, because sometimes the best way to not fight your sister is to make sure you are not near her. They had Summer and Nymeria with them and wandered toward a place where the road dipped and rose again, creating a small bowl with a shrub-thick edge. There, a boy with quick feet and a quicker grin showed himself, and it was the same boy Arya had befriended. the one with dirt-tangled hair and a stick in his hand. "My name is Micah," he said to Bran, as if that meant something important the second time you heard it. "I can show you where the fish are. You don't need a net. You can scoop them in the curve of your hand if you make your hand into a scoop first." Arya made her hand into a scoop. Bran laughed, and then he made his hand into a scoop as well, because if a thing was worth doing, it was often worth looking a little foolish to do it properly. The wolves waited with them, pleased with the cold. It would have been nothing that morning. It should have been nothing. The light turned the water to molten metal in places, and Arya hooped to feel a fish wriggle against her palm. Bran looked up when Summer's ears shifted like sails moving together. Summer's head turned to the path. The hairs along his spine shivered. Nymeria tightened her stance, her head low, eyes steady. Joffrey's horse stepped out from between two elder bushes. Joffrey did not look surprised to see them. Sansa and the rest of the party were far behind. Joffrey had wanted to be ahead. He always wanted it. Behind him came the large man with the broken-out face, his helm dangling from his hand. He had a terrible grace to him, and he watched with a look that felt like a hand closing around the opening of a bag. "What do we have here?" Joffrey said lightly. "Northmen at play? Or is it northern wolves drinking? Which would be the bad manners, I wonder?" Arya straightened. The fish flopped out of her hand and into the water, leaving a shape on her palm that made her grin. "We're not playing," she said, which for Arya could mean both that she was serious and that the seriousness was the play. "And who is this?" Joffrey's eyes went to Micah as a hawk's would go to a rabbit. "Some creature you found? Does it bite?" "My friend," Arya said. "He's teaching me to fish." "Is he?" Joffrey sent the point of his sword toward the water and raised it again. It was a lazy, practiced movement, and the water slid from the blade like a scarf. "Boys of mud teach girls of castles now? Is that how it is in the cold? You'll be teaching him to curtsy next." Bran felt Summer move, not into a lunge but into a readiness. Summer's muscles softened into that strange looseness that meant all the parts of him were one part. Bran's palm found the wetness of the wolf's shoulder again, and it felt as if his hand had put its roots down. He breathed. He thought, "Wait, Micah," Joffrey said, turning the name into an insult by the way he weighted it. "Do you know who I am?" Micah looked at Arya, which was answer enough. He looked back at Joffrey then and shrugged like a boy who has been asked a question to which there are only wrong answers. "A prince," he said. It was not wrong. It was not the right kind of right. Joffrey's smile was the sort of shape a craftsman might make in a bit of wood when he meant it to catch a finger. He turned the blade point down and lifted it again. "Spar with me," he said carelessly. "Lightly. They say the cold makes you quick." Micah's eyes widened. He looked to Arya again, which annoyed Joffrey because it took attention from him. Arya took a step forward without meaning to. Micah's stick, his practice sword, was lying at the lip of the bank. It had knots and would break in one hard blow. "This is foolish," Bran said, and he said it in the exact tone his father used sometimes when he wanted men to feel that they had already decided a thing and now only had to carry out what they had decided. Joffrey lifted his chin. "You'll be teaching your father on the road before long if you sound like that," he said. The big man said nothing, but his mouth moved once as if biting something he could not swallow or spit out. Arya slid a hand toward the stick. Joffrey's blade moved and the tip kissed the air between Micah and Arya's fingers. She stopped, which was wise. The situation felt like the edge of a roof. Every inch forward and it grew more likely you would fall. "Pick it up," Joffrey said to Micah. "Let's see if your mud has made you clever." Micah crouched. He looked as if he might bolt. Bran saw the exact second that fighting seemed safer to Micah than running. You could see such things if you watched closely and believed the first thing the eyes told you rather than the second. Micah grabbed the stick and ran at Joffrey not because it was sensible but because his body knew he must run somewhere. He swung badly, and Joffrey parried so neatly he almost cut the stick in two. He laughed. He did not look at Bran at all. Arya made a little sound that might have been a sob if it had not been too angry to be sad, and then she did the thing that was most like her. She confused everyone by not doing the thing they expected and did the thing her new blade had taught her to do. She darted around Joffrey's horse and grabbed his bridle and jerked. The horse sidled. Joffrey shouted. The sword swung. The big man moved, but not to stop the swing, only to keep Joffrey from falling. The blade glanced along Micah's sleeve and cut skin. Blood beaded bright as berries and ran into the water like dye. Micah screamed. A sound that did not make him small but suddenly very human and very breakable. Summer moved. He did not leap. He moved between Joffrey and Micah. He did it with a slow purpose that felt like the last step a man takes before he signs a paper he knows he cannot call back. He bared his teeth and let a sound rise out of him that had nothing to do with dogs and a great deal to do with winter. Nymeria flanked him, her yellow eyes gone flat with a wildness that did not care about crowns and banners. The horse felt what was in the wolves and made its own decision. It backed hard, and Joffrey's seat wobbled. The world bent, then, in that small bowl by the stream. Bran's hand on Summer's neck felt the exact instant when something was going to happen that would not unhappen. There are moments in climbing when you know that if you grasp the wrong protrusion of stone, your weight will tear it free and you will fall. This was that moment, and Bran reached for the right thing. Back, he said to Summer, and he spoke the word as if it were not sound but force. He put his will into it the way he put his way. GHT into a hold. Back, he said, and the wolf slid, step by step, shoulder to shoulder with Bran. Arya back too, still holding the bridle, fury threatening to make her foolish. Nymeria bared her teeth at the horse, then flicked her ears at Arya and followed. Micah stumbled, one hand on his cut arm, water to his ankles, eyes too big. Joffrey sat very still suddenly, as if stillness might be a shield. They held there for what felt like a long time and was perhaps for heartbeats. Bran did not draw breath. The air drew itself around him anyway, because that is what air does if you forget to do it. Enough, said a voice that carried like a thrown rock, and when Bran turned his head he saw Father, and behind him Jory and 4 men, and behind them the king. Father took in the scene the way a huntsman takes in tracks and droppings and the broken branch. None of it was good, but not all of it was equally bad. It is nothing, he said to the king, who had not yet spoken. A small cut. Boys will be boys. Boys will be fools, Father said, but he did not spit as some men did when they spoke their contempt. And men who are loved will be resented, and men who are feared will be flattered for fear's sake. I would make of you a man who is neither loved falsely nor feared falsely, if I am to help shape you at all. Robert snorted, which was as good as a laugh and not quite. You'll shape him into something, he said, but his eyes were elsewhere already, on the next drink, on the next memory of a woman whose face could not be unremembered. The queen sat her horse like a carved thing and did not look at Micah at all. Her eyes measured Arya and Sansa and landed, finally, on Father. There was a cold in them that was not north. They untangled the moment. Jory bound Micah's arm with clean linen. Arya put her hand on Nymeria's head and kept her there until the wolf's breath had slowed. Sansa came riding with apologies that were not answers, her hair undone from speed. Joffrey sheathed his sword and looked at the big man with the burned face, who looked back at him with an expression that had no feeling in it, as if all his feeling had been burned away long before. When the camp made itself again that night, Mother tended Micah's arm with a care that made his mouth open and shut because he had never been touched like that by a lady before. The queen did not ride near the fire. Joffrey did not ride near Arya. The king drank and sang, and sometimes the song caught in his throat and turned to a cough, and sometimes it turned into something like a cry, though he would not call it that. Father sat with Bran afterward. He had a way of making the world quiet merely by sitting where he sat. Summer lay with his head on Bran's bare feet, which made the last of the day's heat seem to linger in his bones. Do you know, Father asked, what nearly happened there? Bran thought. He did not want to be judged a fool. The wolves would have torn him, he said at last. And who would punish a prince if wolves tear him? You would. The king would make you. And then you would have to punish me and Arya and perhaps the wolves. And then there would be another punishment for that. It would not stop. Father's hand on Bran's shoulder was heavy and not heavy. "You have a talent for seeing the thing behind the thing," he said. "Keep it. It will be the difference between surviving the South and being swallowed by it." Bran thought, "I did not survive the tower by going up today." He held this thought without saying it because saying it would make it smaller. He ran his fingers behind Summer's ear and found the place that always made the wolf twitch his leg. They traveled onward, as travelers do, until the days were piled like folded shirts in a chest, each marked by some small thing that would be remembered later when the big things crowded in. The taste of an orange handed to Bran by a seller who had never seen a boy with a wolf before, the way Myrcella made Sansa laugh until she hiccuped, the night Jon came to their fire from his own and sat with Arya a long while and said almost nothing and left her grinning anyway, the way the stars looked, different when the land dipped and different still when it rose, and the way the smell of the river carried through the trees 3 bends before they saw it. A city waited ahead of them, and a throne, and men who believed they understood how games were played because they had invented rules that suited them. Bran did not know what shape the city would take in his memory yet. He imagined towers that leaned because of heat and bridges that swayed because of weight. He imagined markets where girls played the same games Arya played with different rules and boys like Micah would not be allowed at all. He imagined that he would find places to climb where no one had thought a boy might try. He imagined that nothing would ever be the same again, because ever is after you have seen a king drink in a river and laugh like a bull, and because you have watched a wolf choose to step back when stepping forward would be the truer shape of him. When sleep came for him on the night before they would cross the last stretch of river and come in sight of walls the color of old teeth and sun, it came on quiet paws and lay along his ribs. He dreamed he was a tree growing from the courtyard of Winterfell, roots in warm waters and branches in cold air. He dreamed he was up among roofs that did not belong to him, moving along slates that slid underfoot. He dreamed of summer running, and he did not know which of them lent the other his legs. In the morning the light poured through the leaves like cider poured through a cloth. He woke to the smell of bread and horses, to Arya's voice and Sansa's laughter, to Father's low talk and the king's rough call, to Micah turning his bound arm into a piece of a story for the cook's girl, to Jon's absence that somehow felt like a presence. He woke and the road woke with him. He did not climb that day. He put his hand on Summer's shoulder, and together they walked south into whatever future waited, balanced for the moment on the thin stone ledge between what might have been and what was.